What's up guys, it's Wally, and today we're going to be talking about EVs and EV training. Now, I've had a couple requests in chat to do a video like this where I kind of discuss how to EV train and how EVs really affect your stats. So I wanted to give a little insight in hopes to help you kind of train your Pokemon up to their greatest ability. So we'll get into the video. Before we do, as always, if you guys are new here, just haven't yet, please make sure to go down and hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy this video and videos like this, please make sure to drop a like too. So first of all, what are EVs? So EV stands for effort value. I know, kind of straightforward, doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? So essentially, every Pokemon has 510 effort value points. So for instance, if we go in here and we take a Pokemon like Whimsicott, right? And you go into its, kind of stats here and everything like that, see its EVs remaining there 508. Well, Showdown chose 508. It really is 510. It's just the fact that the way that EVs kind of affect the stats and everything like that, it just kind of makes it impossible to use 510 effectively. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later, but for now we'll kind of focus on this. Don't worry, that'll be a little bit later in this video. So these 510 value points essentially go into any of the stats you want them to go into. There's a maximum of 252, but they can be distributed amongst HP, attack, special defense, and speed. And essentially what the effort value does is raise those stats, effectively. That's kind of the layman's way of saying that. And like I said, there's only a maximum of 252 that you can put into any one specific stat. So anytime you hear anyone say like, oh, it's a max speed or a max attack, that's essentially what they mean. And obviously there's also a thing down here, and you can kind of see it with natures, and those affect stats as well, but I'll save that for another video. So if you guys are interested in a video like that, make sure to leave a comment below. Let me know that you want to see a video like that so I can really describe the natures and kind of how they affect all the stats and everything like that as well. So this will make your Pokemon stronger, faster, and or bulkier depending on where you really want to place your EVs, which really is important when you consider team building. So now that we know what EVs are, how do they affect your Pokemon stats, right? So like I said, every Pokemon is 510, or effectively 508 if you really kind of want to follow, Pokemon Showdown. So the reason why it's 508, and kind of stick with me on this because I kind of have to have my notes for this one too. So for every statistical category, it takes 4 EVs to raise that specific stat by 1 point. So kind of like here, if you see HP, if I put 4 in HP, it goes up to 136 as opposed to 135. However, if you want to raise it by another point after that, it's going to be an additional 8 EVs. Really strange, I get it. So to effectively allocate all your EVs, what you need to do is, I guess, put them in increments of 8 after 4. So I guess the equation would be 8x, x being whatever number you want it to be, whatever increment, plus 4. So I guess in that case, it would either be 4 or 12 or 20 or so on up until 252, which is the max. And obviously if you do 4 and you do 11, it still stays at 136, but if you go up to 12, it goes up to 137. So yeah, the reason why it really can't be 510 is because there's no possible mathematical way for 510 to kind of go into that equation of having to have 4 in a specific stat to raise it by 1 point, and then increments of 8 after that. So just trust me on that. I was a math major in college. I know it's really, really confusing. Trust me, it was confusing for me too when I kind of first learned that. Because I remember I wasn't talking about, it's 510 points. But really you can't effectively do that because this, that. But once I, started to understand that and kind of knew that fact when I was team building, it really made a huge difference for me. So I know a lot of people like to go with Pokemon that are a 252, 252, 4. So if you ever hear that terminology right there, what that essentially means is that someone maxed out a Pokemon stats in 2 different categories and then gave it an extra stat point in one other additional category. Typically that goes in HP or one of the defenses just to kind of give it that little additional bulk. I mean, it doesn't make a huge difference, but trust me, you'd be surprised. I've had a lot of Pokemon that ended up living on 1 HP or 2 HP, and for some reason, I mean, granted, it is partially the roll that you would get because of the RNG, but, that little extra point in HP or defense or something like that ended up kind of being that difference there. So there are a lot of benefits to this. Obviously, if you want to max out in speed, you can put 252 there. And look at that. If you have the nature where you have it where your max speed, 184 compared to, if you didn't have any EVs there, it's 136. That is a huge difference when you're considering the speed on the field. I mean, having, a potential 50-point difference between you and another Whimsicott, that's really huge. There are a lot of Pokemon that fall in that range in between there. And if Whimsicott can't outspeed some of those, if it ends up doing a move, obviously it's not going to go first. Thankfully for Whimsicott, it does have Prankster, which allows it, if you do end up doing something that's not an attacking move, it does get an additional priority, so, the speed doesn't really matter from that perspective. But when you are in a speed tie and you're going against another Whimsicott or another Prankster Pokemon, and you want to have that speed, sometimes it's important. But when you have a certain meta, like we've kind of had for the last year and a half, where Zacian's kind of all around, you have Incineroar and Pokemon like that. Sometimes you really need to kind of spec out your Pokemon so that you can survive certain hits from them. Obviously, the most common one for me, at least when I was speccing out Pokemon, was Zacian's Behemoth Blade, and there are a lot of great websites for that. For instance, one that I really like to use is Pikalytics here. Where you can just put in one Pokemon, you can put in the other one. Obviously, in some instances, you don't know what kind of set you're going to be playing against. So, for this one here, on the one side, we have Zacian that is max attack and adamant, which means that is truly, truly max attack. So that's going to be the strongest Zacian that someone could put out there. So we want to make it so that we could potentially survive a hit. But either way, websites like this can really, really help you with that. Including this thing down here with the Survival EV Minimizer, which really makes it so that you really can allocate your EVs properly. So I definitely recommend going to some of these sites right here, because they can really explain it more in depth. But my point is, sometimes it's really important to kind of make your Pokemon be able to survive hits that you will potentially see. And also with the Minimizer, it also makes it so that that you can survive certain hits, and those extra EVs, you can put that in attack, or you can put it in speed, special attack, something like that to make you even more powerful too. So for instance, there are certain, instances where you're going to end up seeing a Zacian across from another Zacian. Zacian really is on a huge amount of teams. And you even saw it in Worlds too, a lot of the teams, I can't give you the exact stat because I'm not quite prepared for that. But there were a lot of teams, especially up there in the top 16, top 8, that ended up having a Zacian on the team. So there was a very good possibility that you might have Zacian v Zacian. So one of the more important things for me that I like to spec out when I was building my Zacian was that it was going to survive the Behemoth Blade. That's going to be the strongest move that Zacian can use against another Zacian. So I really wanted to make sure that I could survive that one hit so I can stay out there and be able to potentially knock out their Zacian or another Pokemon that they have as well. So what we ended up doing was making it so that our stats over there on the right side, with our kind of blank Zacian per se, ended up being able to withstand one Behemoth Blade from that Zacian. Obviously, there are critical hits and everything like that, but, you can't really account for that. You can't assume that that's going to happen. So we're going to assume that that doesn't happen. So you can see with 92 HP EVs and 12 defense EVs, we'd be able to withstand one Behemoth Blade from this Zacian over here that is max attack. So no matter what Zacian they could throw out there, as long as it's not a crit and they don't have an extra boost on top of their already +1, we're going to be able to survive that hit no matter what. And the great thing about this too is that since we are just calcing it to make sure that we survive one Behemoth Blade, we make sure that we also put enough EVs into attack and everything like that to make sure that we have a possibility of OHKOing them with just, again, OHKO, one hit knockout. So basically just hitting them with one shot and being able to knock them out as well. And on this one with 220 EVs in attack and everything like that, we actually have a 31.3% chance to knock out their Zacian in one shot, which is really incredible because that means your Zacian, which with its speed, if it doesn't already, get hit again that turn and get knocked out, you'll have that one additional turn because there aren't too many Pokemon that end up outspeeding Zacian, right? And really, there's so many different combinations of EVs in Pokemon that really, it really is kind of a guessing game. you really don't know. So being able to do these calculations and make sure that you survive something like that really could be the difference between a win and a loss. So making sure that you can survive hits from common Pokemon really is pretty important when you're considering team building and placing EVs in certain Pokemon. So make sure you check your weakness, and also don't forget to allocate your EVs in increments of 8 after 4. So 4, 12, 20, and so on after that, all the way up to 252. So now that we've discussed how EVs really affect stats, let's discuss the 3 main ways of EV training Pokemon. So the first way, which really is kind of the natural way, is by battling. So every time you face a Pokemon, they give you a certain amount of EV points in a certain category. So for instance, if we look here at Squavit, it shows you that its EV yield is 1 HP. And also if we look at Rookidee, it gives off 1 speed EV every single time that you defeat one. There are a couple Pokemon that end up giving you 2 or more EVs every time you defeat them, but there are a lot of websites, again, like Pokemon DB, that allow you to kind of see what their EV yield is. So if you see a common Pokemon that's out there, make sure to kind of Google it or kind of search it on here and kind of see what EVs it gives off. So that way, if you are seeing a lot of them, that might be a really good place to kind of farm for that to be able to EV train your Pokemon effectively. So this kind of begs the question, when you're kind of doing your playthrough of Pokemon, are your Pokemon getting EV trained while you're battling all those trainers? And the answer is, yeah. And sometimes it's a little frustrating when you're kind of training up a team and you want that team that you end up beating the game with to be EV trained properly and to use them in competitive. Sometimes that's not always the case. Thankfully though, there are ways to reduce your Pokemon's EVs after they attain them. And the main 2 ways that you're able to do that is 1, through berries, and number 2, through a woman in the Isle of Armor that ends up erasing your EVs for a given Pokemon. That ends up costing 10 Armorite ore, but honestly, sometimes that might be the best way to go if you don't have the certain berries to lower the EVs. So the lady that actually ends up erasing your EVs, just to kind of show you on the map, so obviously this is the Isle of Armor right here. So if you end up like flying to the dojo right here, sorry, I have a hard time with my Joy-Cons apparently. If you fly to the dojo, all you have to do is kind of go down around the beach, and this little island right here with the crown on it, that's where she's going to be standing. Again, all you have to do, go over there, talk to her, give her 10 Armorite ore, select the Pokemon that you want their EVs erased, and it'll completely wipe them out no matter how much they have. For berries, you'll kind of see in the description what they end up lowering. So you can see here with the Qualop berry, it says, it makes it more friendly, but it lowers the defense base points. So that's kind of where it'll tell you what it is. But for all the other ones, it is the Pomeg berry that reduces the HP, Kelpsy berry that reduces the attack, obviously the Qualop berry, which reduces defense, Hondu reduces special attack, Greppa reduces special defense, and the Tomato reduces the speed. So each of these berries will reduce that given stat by 10 base points. So it's nice that you don't have to feed them, 252 berries to be able to reduce, a full attack all the way down to nothing. Instead, you'll end up, only giving 26 instead. And so it's nice because it helps you kind of conserve on berries as well, but still, feeding them 26 berries sometimes might not be feasible because you might not have the berries for it. Thankfully for us here with the Qualop berry and everything, we do have more than enough, but sometimes you might not, and sometimes you might have more than one Pokemon to do that to, so sometimes you might have to go to the Isle of Armor to get the lady to be able to erase and completely wipe out all your EVs. But basically what I'm trying to say is that when you're in post-game, battling is a really cheap and, while time-consuming, still a pretty simple way to be able to increase your EVs of your Pokemon. However, you might not want to battle 252 Squavit to be able to max out your HP. And I really don't blame you for that. I barely wanted to feed, 20 Squavit, let alone 252. But thankfully, there are ways to be able to increase these stats quicker. The first way to do that is with power items. So, just quickly over here. So you see, there are a couple different items that have, power in their name. So you got the Power Weight, the Power Bracer, the Belt, Lens, Band, and Anklet. And you can kind of see next to them, they have a corresponding stat, the HP attack, and so on. So basically what that means is that if a Pokemon is holding that item, if they're facing a Pokemon that gives off that EV stat, what it'll do is increase it by 8. So for instance, if you are facing Squavit, that typically only gives off 1 HP, that will increase it to 9. That is a big jump, right? I mean, it will cut your speed in half, which, yeah, is never fun, but when you're EV training, it is definitely worth it. At least in my opinion, I think it is definitely worth it. I mean, especially when you're battling like Squavit and Rookidee and Pokemon like that, you don't necessarily need the speed. You're already taking out Pokemon that are levels and levels lower than you, so really the speed doesn't really matter too much. So this will effectively make it so that you don't have to fight 252 Squavit to max out your HP, you would only have to face 28. That sounds a lot more manageable, right? But it still sounds a little daunting. And you know what? I don't blame you. Again, this isn't necessarily my preferred strategy of EV training Pokemon and stuff like that. You know, I like to use, a couple of the methods that we will end up talking about in a little bit, but this is really a great way to do it. 28 Pokemon, that's not too bad. But for me, I'm a person who doesn't like to do this method of EV training. I like to do some of the other ones that we'll talk about in a little bit. So 28 still sounds daunting. This leads us to the second way to kind of make this a much quicker process, which is Pokerus. So any Pokemon really can contract Pokerus randomly in battle, I guess, but there is a 1 in 21,842 chance of contracting Pokerus. That is crazy. However, once you do contract it, it's not like all your Pokemon have to contract it individually. Your Pokemon who actually contracted it becomes contagious. And thankfully, it is pretty easy to be able to spread Pokerus to some of your other Pokemon. So all you really have to do is take that Pokemon, put it into your party, and the Pokemon that are kind of adjacent to it in your party will end up contracting it after a couple battles. Look out though, because Pokemon, after a little while, don't necessarily become cured of Pokerus because they will have Pokerus forever. But after a certain amount of time, which is typically like a couple days, they end up not becoming contagious anymore. So while they'll still get the benefit and everything like that, they won't be able to spread it if you keep them in your party. One way to kind of conserve their contagion and everything like that, for lack of a better term, you just have to put them in the box. That'll conserve their contagion again. However, they won't be able to spread it in the box. You'll have to take it out of your box and put it into your party to be able to spread it to your other Pokemon. So make sure you're strategic with, the way that you end up kind of making it spread amongst your Pokemon. Because it is actually sometimes a good idea to infect some of your other Pokemon that you might not use. So that way you can just kind of take them out of your box, put them in your party, and kind of make use of them later, when you might need them at a later date, because you never know. There might be someday that you contract Pokerus, and then like a year later, you might really need it to be able to EV train Pokemon. And it's always nice to kind of find a contagious Pokerus Pokemon in your box if you really need it. So now that we talked about the contagion and everything like that, basically what it does is it makes it so that when you're EV training and everything like that, it really doubles the effect of everything. And this even works with the power items as well. So pretty much in the example that I was talking about with Squavit, if you end up taking out one Squavit, it gives you 1 HP. If you're wearing the power weight as well, it ends up giving you 9. And if you end up having Pokerus as well, my goodness, man, you're getting 18 HP EVs in just one Squavit. So instead of 252 Squavit, really all you have to do is face 14. And that sounds a lot more manageable. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work to be able to get Pokerus, put the power, item on it, and be able to find the Squavit and everything like that. But I would much rather do 14 than 252. So make sure that you end up using these mechanics and kind of think about that strategy when you're going through and using this way to be able to EV train your Pokemon. The next way to EV train is with vitamins. So basically with vitamins, this is definitely the most costly way of doing this. Trust me, I've spent millions and millions and millions of Pokédollars on trying to EV train Pokemon with vitamins. So you can see here we have the HP up, protein, iron, calcium, zinc, and carbos. All of these raise a specific stat by 10 points. So obviously with carbos, it says that it raises speed. So for each carbos that you give that Pokemon, that will give it an additional 10 EVs in speed. And you can tell as well, it does get pretty costly. Because if you do want to do max speed on a Pokemon, and keep in mind, this is only for one stat, you want to get 26 Carbos because that will max it out all the way up to 252. However, that will end up costing you $260,000. Which means when all is said and done, if you do go with the vitamins, you're spending more than $500,000 on one Pokemon to completely EV train them. Actually, if we want to get exact, it's $530,000, which is, yeah, a lot. So, if you're rolling in the dough, you can definitely use this method, but some of us aren't that rich. I mean, I know I have $1 million in here right now, but it's only going to train 2 Pokemon. That's not going to be a full team, right? So, again, you kind of have to be rich to just use vitamins, but sometimes it's the smartest way to go, and again, if you're rolling in the dough, why not? Another great way to do this as well is actually in the Isle of Armor again. I guess I can kind of show, but I don't have the full array of vitamins over in the dojo. So if you end up going over to the Isle of Armor, you'll have to end up going in the dojo again. So there is a certain NPC in this game named Honey. And I only know their name because I've gotten their Pokemon card so many times now. But basically what they do, and they're usually standing right up here, if I can actually run in this game, right up here in the front, the lady with the green sweater. So pretty much what you do is you're here to share some watts. And after a certain amount of watts, and I know I only have 61,000, and I'll get into the reason for that in a little bit, but once you donate a certain amount of watts, and I forget exactly how many it is, but I think it's like 500,000 or something like that, you'll have access to these vending machines back here in the back. And so what this will do will give you access to being able to buy the vitamins in bulk and at a cheaper cost. So obviously for me, all I have are protein and iron right now, and that's because I'd never want to give up my watts for that. And I always say I'm going to end up doing it, but we're less than a month away from Scarlet Violet releasing, so I don't think that's going to happen. So basically going in the vending machine, it'll allow you to buy 1 for 10,000, which is market value over at the shops. You can buy 5 for 40,000, 10 for 70,000, or 25 for 125,000. So basically, that cuts your cost in half. And that's really nice if you have the watts to be able to go and make the vending machine available for yourself. But for some people like me, we just never got around to it. But that is another good way to cut your costs. Another great way is to end up finding watt traders. Now, I don't know exactly where they are here in the Isle of Armor, and so I don't want to put you guys through having to watch me try to struggle and find. So I know there's one right here. I don't think that he has them right now, but what you have to do is essentially go up to the watt trader right here. Trade. No, he doesn't. So pretty much every day, they will have a certain Pokeball that's available. Obviously, right now, it's the Heal Ball, which is only 20 watts. But sometimes they have luxury balls. I forget exactly for how many watts, but compared to how many watts you get from going and checking a den that is kind of lit up, it's pretty inconsequential. So you can buy pretty much a ton of luxury balls, and this is what I typically do. And I think it's only like, I think it's like 500 watts or something. And so sometimes if you have like 1,000,000 watts, you can buy like 999 of them. And all you have to do is just buy a bunch of them, and then you just have to go to the shop and go sell them. So I think you receive, it's either $1,500 or $2,500 per luxury ball, which will then allow you to be able to buy your vitamins so much easier, because when you're selling 999 luxury balls for, $1,500, $2,500 a pop, yeah, you're going to be rolling in the dough. Either way, vitamins are a great, quick, yet still costly way to be able to EV train your Pokemon. Finally, and this is probably the most timely way of EV training your Pokemon, is you can use PokeJobs. So essentially what PokeJobs do, and I'll kind of show you because you have to end up going to the Rotom computer to be able to access them. And some of you might already know what they are because it's a good way to end up training up and leveling up your Pokemon as well. If you have the time to be able to do it, of course. So all you have to do is go to PokeJobs here, and again through the Rotom computer. And amongst the ones that allow you to kind of level up your Pokemon, down at the bottom, you will see these here, which are kind of seminar sessions. And they're pretty straightforward as well. You have the HP, you have the attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. And again, it's pretty straightforward. So all you'd have to do is end up clicking into them. Yes, you want to accept the job offer. And again, these are Pokemon that can't be in your party. They have to be in your box. So for instance, if I selected Azumarill, you would select them and you'd have to hit B to go back and say you're done, which is nice because they always kind of make sure that you're not putting in Pokemon that you don't want to do. Because I've done that before and yeah, that's never good. So what you can do is you can end up going in, hit send them to job, and you can send them for a certain period of time. So if I end up sending a Azumarill for a little bit of time, they will be there for a full hour and they will receive 4 EV points in that specific category. Of course, if you can obviously change it up a little bit, you can go very short, that's 2 hours and it'll raise it 8 points. Short, you go for 3 hours and it's 12 points. Long is 4 hours and 16 points. Very long is 8 hours and 32 points. Half a day is 12 hours and 48 points. And a whole day is, you guessed it, 24 hours, but a full 96 points. Keep in mind that power items do kind of count here as well as Pokerus, so keep that in mind when you want to go, because on one hand, yeah, that'll make it quicker to be able to train up your Pokemon to its max ability. However, if you do want a specific amount and you only want to go for, say, the 12, because that's how many you need specifically, you just need to be careful to make sure that you are sending them for the perfect amount of time so you get the perfect amount of EVs. So if you have time to actually train up your team and leave them in the PokeJobs, so say it's like a team that you don't need for, say a month or two, like you have it for a tournament or something like that, you can always throw them in the PokeJobs and be able to find them later, so you can work on your current teams and be able to still play without having to worry about Pokemon that you don't necessarily have an urgency to EV train. So that's really what you need to know about EV training. And while I know it seems like a really complicated process, what with all the power items, the Pokerus, the increments in which they go up and everything like that, it really does become second nature once you get the hang of it. So if there's anything that I missed or you guys are still confused about anything, please make sure to leave a comment down below and I'll make sure to help you guys out as much as possible. If I have to make a follow-up video or anything like that, I'll make sure to do that as well. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully this kind of helped you guys out a little bit, and in the future when you're doing some team building, hopefully you'll remember some of these tips and it'll make you kind of optimize your team a bit. Especially now as we're going into Scarlet and Violet, hopefully you can use some of these tips in that game as well. I hope you guys liked this video. If you guys did, make sure to drop a like and we'll see you guys next time.